So, hey, Kate, welcome to Self-Worth School. I'm so happy to have you here as a guest. I always have a little pre-chat with my potential guests so we can dive into like topics. And I'm really excited about what we're going to speak about today because this is an angle that I haven't covered yet. So welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to specialize in dating psychology, relationships, and just helping women to break unhealthy relationship patterns?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a registered clinical psychologist and I've been practicing for about 15 years in lots of varieties of different settings. But the work that I've come to really love is working with people who from the outside seem like they've got it all together.
Mhm.
Everything's going pretty well, but inside is where the mess lives. So
Yeah.
that is where you've got the overthinking, anxiety, and in some cases, eventually burnout.
Mm.
And there was kind of a subgroup of those people that I also noticed time and time again. Women, again, really functioning really well in life, but just constantly getting stuck in patterns that they didn't want to repeat in dating. And I felt like I had a lot in my back pocket for that. So that's where I created, alongside my normal clinical practice, a dating program specifically for women. And I think I love that work so much because it's a real point where you can intervene where it matters for somebody.
Yeah.
Because the choice of partner that you make massively affects everything in life, from your
Yeah.
finances to your well-being to everything.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so if you're making choices for the right reasons and you know that they're the right reasons, and you're also starting to address some of the patterns which we'll come on to that might be part of your contribution in early dating to things going the direction that you don't like, then actually it sets you up on a totally different trajectory. So you
Mm.
can really catch it there. And it's a lot easier to unpick than obviously being in a relationship you've been in for 20 years, where it's absolutely still possible to make changes, but you're working with much more ingrained patterns. So I love that work for that reason. And in that program, there are three different patterns that I talked about with you that I think are
Hmm.
very relevant to the conversation we're going to have about overgiving. And
Yes.
it's a topic that resonates a lot with me. So I'm really happy that you raised it as something that we should focus on.
Yeah, definitely. Anything like that. I'm such a geek about stuff like that. And I know a lot of people that listen to the podcast are the same. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive in. So keep your ears peeled, ears open for that.
For your ears, if you want.
I always get those things the wrong way around. So I think so many women will recognize this feeling of being the one that everybody relies on, putting everyone first and ending up exhausted, which is one of, the patterns I think that we've kind of talked about. Why do you think so many women fall into these patterns of being that, or taking on that role?
I think there are two main issues and they're slightly different. First one is the one that we'll mainly talk about, which is about individual patterns. So
Mm.
the reasons why you personally, from your own history, the
Yeah.
way things have gone for you, might play a certain role that tends towards overgiving. The second one I think rarely gets talked about, but is really important. And I'm passionate about it because it stops people from just feeling like it's their individual problem and it's their fault. And
Hmm.
that is this part that structurally in society, in culture, really trends towards women being rewarded and praised for qualities like being agreeable, helpful, responsible, and keeping the peace.
Yeah.
And so that sits above those patterns as something that makes it even more likely. These patterns could apply to women or men, but my hunch is women have a lot more of these patterns than men because of that societal pressure to go down that route.
Yeah. Yeah. And why do you feel they are like they are often so praised rather than questioned? So you mentioned there these are just kind of the accepted qualities of an agreeable, kind. Well, it's almost like it's like associated with kindness, isn't it? Like if you're not doing it, you're not kind. But yeah, tell me why you think they're often praised rather than questioned.
It's something which sort of has gone under the radar in history until perhaps there was a big book in the 80s written by a Harvard psychologist called Carol Gilligan, which started to expose even the way that we bring up young girls and women is different to the way that boys are brought up. And she talked in that about the kinds of ways in which, as parents, as teachers, as society, reinforcing qualities like caring for people, keeping relationships smooth,
Uh-huh.
and perhaps silencing or just turning down your own needs if it's going to disrupt harmony. Those are things that are sort of, even from an early age,
Yeah.
raised and reinforced in girls that are not treated the same as
Yeah.
boys.
Mm.
Things have improved. So, in terms of her initial book, she was talking about ambition and achievement also being things that were sort of turned down and quietened in girls. Now, over the last kind of, gosh, is it 40 years? I think it is. I'm a child of the 80s.
Sadly, yes. Sadly, it is 40 years.
Yes. So over the last 40 years, things have massively improved. And actually, we see many women in the workplace, the qualities of achievement, you can be whatever you want to be.
Um,
All those things are now very mainstream for us. So that sort of cultural messaging has changed. But the difficulty is that those assumptions around caring qualities and caregiving have not changed. And tons of studies back this up. And that still sits quietly underneath the surface. So you can end up being in a situation as a woman where you're sort of out in the world doing all these achievement things and very ambitious, but yet the load of caring is still falling to you. And
I
I'm
know a
sure we'll
few.
go on. Oh, carry on. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just saying, I can literally think of a few people that is very much the case for at the moment that I know.
Yeah. And we'll talk, I'm sure, about home, but even in the workplace, it's interesting. Like there's studies about the assertiveness penalty. So if a woman displays qualities like setting boundaries, perhaps being outspoken, being decisive, those will receive negative feedback.
Yeah.
That is shown. Whereas the guy is doing those same qualities and they'll be sort of rewarded and seen as good leadership
Yeah. Yeah.
qualities. So it still plays out in workplaces. And the second thing is office housework. So women can end up falling into doing a lot of the office housework, the invisible glue
Um,
that holds the office together, which is everything from like remembering the leaving card and getting a cake to noticing that something's gone wrong in a meeting and talking to someone afterwards.
yeah.
Um,
Or
and
sorting out the stationery or like,
no, exactly.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
these micro tasks take loads of extra time for women.
Yeah.
And if a man is doing it, they tend to lean towards promotion. Whereas for a woman, it's just absorbed invisibly. So
Yeah.
it's sort
Oh,
of,
so true and so
yeah.
depressing in some instances. But just to go back a second around, in case anybody's interested, what do you remember what the name of the book was that you mentioned? That was by Carol, what's her face?
Well, no, we can have it in the show
Yeah,
notes.
we
It's
can have a look
1982.
at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, lovely. And so, actually, as well, just picking up on that thing you were saying about how those different qualities around like assertiveness, like ambition, and that are like punished in the workplace versus men. You do often hear that, don't you? That women who kind of speak their mind or are quite, cold, hard leaders are like, wow, she's like a cold faced bitch. Like I know I've been
Yeah.
in organizations before where there's been, a very strong, very like not dispassionate leader, but they're very, very passionate, but because, like I said, very much like a man's role. And then everyone's like, oh, wow, such a cold, hard person or whatever. Whereas, like I say, nobody would say that if it was a man. They'd be like, what a great leader. And, I do
It's very
believe in
warm.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you wouldn't expect it
exactly.
to be
Do I need
warm.
to be emotional about it? Do I need to nurture? And, I do believe in the balance between like feminine and masculine qualities in terms of making a good rounded person and a good leader. So I don't necessarily believe that one should be one way or another way. But
Mm.
I also don't feel like they should be penalized or made to be like, if you show the qualities of a man, then this automatically makes you it's not even about being undesirable, isn't it? It's something way more than that. But yeah, definitely. Again, I think a point and an observation that I think a lot of people will probably be able to recognize for sure.
Yeah. And it's just that evidence of society playing out.
Yeah,
So that means the easier path, the path that's trained for us is going down the
yeah,
giving, nurturing, nice route.
yeah.
And
Making
it's a lot
making
harder
life
to go against the
easy.
grain.
Yeah, being the kind, being the good girl, being the one that helps people out. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Mm.
what's the cost of all this then to us as women and to others as well, seen and unseen, because often we want to be seen as giving, and we want to have people rely on us. And I know that from working with my own clients, ones that take stuff on and, struggle to set boundaries because they're trying to own their place or their value through who they are to others. But, often it feels like, oh, it should be a good positive thing that, people can call on me and they rely on me and, I help people and I want to be seen as giving. But yeah, what's the kind of cost, both hidden and otherwise, to, falling into those patterns?
Such a good question because you're absolutely right. It can be such a core part of someone's identity, and
Yeah.
it's nice to be nice, right? So yes, it's important to notice like what the costs actually are. And I mean, the sort of more obvious seen costs would be things like getting exhausted,
Yeah.
be that the physical exhaustion of waking up and being like, I don't feel like I've slept, to the exhaustion where you're awake at 4 a.m. thinking about the lunch boxes for tomorrow and sort of what's happening at work and things like that. Resentment,
Mm,
which can really build up in different relationships, be it work or at home, and play out in more arguments and more disagreement. And
yeah.
no one likes to feel like they're arguing and
No.
disagreeing. So that's also really difficult to take, both for you and your family or workplace, but also for you.
Hmm.
And burnout ultimately,
Yeah.
because if you keep taking on and giving, but you're not receiving and you're not putting into that well is going to run dry.
Yeah.
The unseen costs are quite interesting too. I don't know
Mm.
if there was anything you want to say about the seen
No,
costs
no, no.
first.
Yeah, no, just agree. Yeah, you crack on. Yeah, the unseen. Yeah.
This is, I guess, where I get an absolute bird's eye view on it from talking to people
Mm.
in my office.
Yeah.
And it's really sad because people can spend so much of that time in that identity of being capable and responsible and hopeful. That is the side of themselves that they're putting across to everybody and everyone's responding to. And it means that the other part that perhaps it's lonely, it's vulnerable, it's anxious, doesn't get as much airtime and doesn't get support.
Yeah.
And that can be a very, very lonely place to be in.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's also that sort of just erosion of knowing what you actually need. If you're so focused on other people,
Yeah.
then actually it can be really hard to tune into what you need and
Yeah.
figure out sort of who am I? Like what even brings me joy anymore? I don't
Yeah.
know. Who
Yeah.
am I?
That's one that I see a lot. Definitely the resentment. Like I've seen that in people close to me who take on like both the emotional and physical and like logistical load of like a household.
Mm,
Even though nobody's kind of said that, they haven't said, right, these are your tasks, but they do it and then they feel resentment for doing it. But they've also kind of set that expectation and put themselves. I'm not saying that it doesn't mean people shouldn't notice and pick up the slack, but I've seen that resentment on one side, and I've also had a lot of clients come to me like they don't have a sense of what it is that they want anymore because they've been so focused on who they are to everybody else.
mm,
When we say what brings you joy, what are your hobbies, what would you love to get lost in, they're a bit like, I don't even know. If I had
yeah,
spare time, I don't even know how I'd spend it anymore because they've been so focused on being everything to everybody else that if they're not doing that, they don't really know what it is that they want to do.
absolutely. Sleep, rest. That can
Yes.
sometimes be if you've gotten really down to the bottom of that well, then it may be that the first line of defense is just, I need some food and I need some sleep.
Yeah.
And it's only really after you've met that need that you can build back up again to what are my actual wishes and joy in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the other thing to say about getting to that level is it can have a real physical cost. And that's something which often is
Mm.
less recognized.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a coincidence that women have twice as many autoimmune diseases as men. And also things like inflammatory diseases are very linked to chronic stress and the
Yeah.
chronic activation of cortisol.
Yeah.
So we're not saying overgiving gives you an autoimmune disease, but this pattern of behavior
Yeah.
runs you dry is a big
Yeah.
part of the factors you can control
Yeah, yeah. No, it makes
that sit
absolute
there.
sense. It makes absolute sense because if you are overgiving and you are constantly, like you say, either experience those stress levels or constantly going without rest, it stands to reason that your body's inflammatory systems would be more, or you are going to be more susceptible to tiredness or illness because your energy is going elsewhere. So yeah, it makes sense to say that.
Mm.
So we talked about these kind of three
Yeah.
patterns at the beginning. And what I loved when we spoke about was your framework around the pleaser, the helper, and the protector. So can you talk us through each of those patterns and how they appear?
Mm. As a psychologist, I'm always interested not only in the behavior I'm seeing, but what's going on under the surface. What are the
Mm,
reasons for it?
yeah.
And I think that's where considering why you're overgiving and what sort of function it's meeting can be really helpful. So one reason people might be overgiving is having the pleaser pattern. And the pleaser pattern is about fundamentally believing that I only get love and approval if I'm agreeable. That means that challenge or confrontation feels like it risks the whole relationship. And you might expect criticism, which also might impact your self-worth.
Hmm.
So as a result, a lot of energy is going into keeping the peace, keeping things smooth, making sure there's absolutely no conflict. And so the kinds of things you might see in someone that's doing that, or that's the pattern underlining for them, would be like it's the yes, yes to everything sort of thing. It's scanning the room for not only your close loved ones, but if it's a big problem for you, maybe even just anyone in the room. Like, any needs here?
Yeah.
A
Anything
person
I
over
can?
there, sir.
Anyone needs
Yeah.
support? Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, that person needs help with the coat. I'll go thanks and do that. So a lot of your emotional and sort of mental energy is actually outside of yourself,
Mm,
scanning for other people's needs and adapting to what they want, crucially, and accommodating what they want.
yeah.
And it might even mean that you're more likely to, if you do have a printed irritation that you've noticed, which you might not have done because you're focused on everyone else, then maybe that you want to suppress them and actually not mention anything and avoid conflict. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where
Yeah.
you're sort of pleasing people, perhaps sometimes noticing that happening. Overall, just it's below the surface
Hmm.
and no one's aware of it but you.
Yeah.
And maybe there's an occasional blow up, but the pattern never
Mm,
really changes.
yeah. Yeah. And
So I move on to the helper
yeah,
pattern. Or,
yeah, please do. Yeah.
okay. So the second flavor of this problem is what I call the helper pattern. So that is where your driver is more about, I'm giving because I need to feel needed. It's my job. Like I feel responsible. I should be fixing things for people. And if I'm not helpful, I'm not going to receive love and care. Now, the irony is that, and this is, I guess, an exaggeration of stuff. So it's not just about being helpful and supportive. It's over giving. It's kind of over
Mm,
functioning. So when I'm talking about it in dating, it's like the guy that comes to you saying, I've just lost my job, my mum's ill, and I'm in a complete mess. And most people are like, no, thank you. That sounds like you're a mess. Person with this helper pattern is leaning in and being like, oh, that sounds really difficult. Oh, have you considered doing X, Y, Z? Sort of
mm,
it's about fixing as well on this pattern. And in a household, I guess might mean again just feeling like I'm the one in charge, I'm the one responsible, I need to run the show. I'm most comfortable offering and providing support to people.
hmm.
And these people can feel very uncomfortable if actually they're feeling vulnerable and the focus is on them and they might need something.
Yeah.
So kind of almost pedaling away from the support,
Yeah.
and wanting to be back in a position where they're the one providing.
Mm,
Um, and that's where you can get that particular burnout problem because you can overfunction so much that you're ignoring fatigue
yeah.
and it's leading right into exhaustion and burnout. So it's more than that supportive nature. It's
Yeah.
really OTT.
Yeah. To the point, like you said, that's detrimental to your health. It's not just pleasing everybody. It's like it's even like a step further, isn't it, than that almost? Mm.
Yeah. Your neighbour's ill. You're the one that's making like lasagna and popping it around on their doorstep, whereas someone else is like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And how about the protector?
Yes. So the final, and I think it's relevant to our conversation, is the protector. And this is an interesting one because it can look like strength from the outside. And depending on you, you might even experience it as more comfortable and strong. It's that kind of self-sufficiency thing. So it's
Hmm.
around like, I'm independent, I don't need anything from anyone. But actually the reason for that is it secretly feels much safer not to need anything from anyone because there's
Mm,
a likelihood you're going to be looked down by people.
yeah.
And so that might be alongside stuff that looks similar to the other patterns. You might be quite good at distracting yourself with really getting into your work or really getting into your hobbies. And you might be in charge of the household too. But the reasons for avoiding conflict might be about just not wanting to get into the emotional
Mhm.
talk or being concerned that you don't want things. So it's similar kind of, I don't want to rock the boat and I don't want things to explode. I'm just not comfortable with handling the emotional talk and
Yeah.
sort of wanting to keep everybody a bit at arm's length because it feels safer to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you've talked about quite a lot of signs there that people might either identify with or recognize, but how might our students today, our
Mhm.
listeners, recognize themselves in them? Is there anything that you would normally say to kind of think, okay, if you're not sure which is which, how might you recognize, or what's the best way to recognize how you're appearing?
Yeah, I mean, the nutshell of each of them is the pleaser pattern is about avoiding conflict and
Yeah.
fearing that you'll be seen as not good enough if you're not agreeable. The helper is about that sort of I must help and be responsible. And protector is about I must stay away, I must stay self-sufficient and not need things from
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I think it's about going one level, asking yourself one extra question than you normally would. So, okay, God, how did I end up volunteering to do that for that person? It's because I didn't want to say no. Okay, well then that is the people pleasing pattern that's interfering for you. Whereas for someone else, it might be I just really liked feeling needed, or I felt like it was my job, or I
Mm,
couldn't resist the urge to step in and fix it. That
yeah.
would be the helper pattern.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the common belief underneath all three? Is there one in your experience?
Yeah, I mean it's basically that sort of thing around self-worth being conditional.
Yeah.
So I'm not good enough unless I give is basically it. And the problem is that also therefore means I can't just be and be
Mm,
okay.
yeah. 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 Because you're always having to, if you, like I say, if your worth is on how much value I bring to other people, then like I say, you're never going to be able to rest because you're always going to think, well, rest means I'm not being valuable, and therefore people might not need me or want me or yeah, see the value in having me around. Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. And you describe these kind of because they, there are protective strategies. Obviously, there's a protector which clearly within its name, but it's protective in terms of not being abandoned, not no longer being needed, and what have you. But yeah,
mm,
you call them protective strategies rather than personality traits, which I think is a really important
yes.
distinction. In my last episode, we were talking about perfectionism and calling yourself a perfectionist, and how also that is like a survival strategy. So a lot of these things are survival strategies, but we kind of claim them as identity, don't we? We go, oh, I'm a people pleaser, or I'm just a helper kind of person. Like it's who we are rather than personality traits. But can you explain what you mean by that when you say it's protective strategy?
Absolutely. It's something that typically develops when we're quite young.
Hmm.
So we learn these patterns because they get the most out of the people looking after us, be that parents or other
Yeah.
people. And if ideally, of course, we're all bathed in love no matter what we do. But even well-intended parents can end up sort of accidentally reinforcing some things over others. And so these strategies, what I mean by protective patterns is basically maybe the best way to get something out of the best connection with your parent was you were reinforced because you were helpful, for
Mm.
example. And
Yeah.
there's all kinds of family circumstances where that might be necessary for you to take that role. But
Hmm.
that means then that every example of that, every time that that's praised or something, you develop a bit more of that piece of your identity. And so over time, it can feel like your identity, but actually, it's just a set of behaviors that you've done over and over again that work in the context where they women. So it may be that for a lot of people, these roles still make sense in their
Yeah.
families of origin. Problem is they context jump. So actually, they don't make sense at work. They lead to burnout at work,
Mm.
or they don't make sense in dating. They lead you to pick people who are going to drain you dry.
Yeah.
And that's where at least having a vantage point to think, okay, what am I doing and why am I doing it? And do I
Mhm.
need to do it in this context? Or actually, am I safer than I am? Am I safe to be myself more than I was before?
And so there is a lot of that kind of childhood and early experiences, isn't there? But as we mentioned before, there's probably an element of that conditioning by society. This is the best way to be a parent, a
Hmm.
partner, a colleague. So yeah, that there is an element of the stuff that we're hearing around us, isn't as well, isn't there?
Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, basically there's a point in childhood around 5 or 6 where not only have you absorbed gender stereotypes, but you can get briefly quite rigid about them. And
Mm,
then after that, it's kind of up for grabs. But if all the messages you get from your parents, from society, from your teachers, from the media kind of lead in the same direction,
yeah.
then it keeps you on that track of sort of prioritizing certain qualities over others. And by the time we're sort of seeing adolescent girls, that's when those traits are most starting to get
Yeah.
fixed as things which are the way that they operate naturally without questioning it.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a lot about how to spot it, the different ways in which it shows up, and we've talked a little bit about the link to self-worth in terms of why we do these things. So maybe once we get to that stage of awareness, or maybe this is ringing some bells in kind of people's minds, like how do we stop that overgiving, once we've been in that pattern for so long? Because one of the things I tend to see between sometimes in my clients is they have the awareness, so we might do some work together and they have some awareness about their patterns, about their beliefs. But how do we use that knowledge or awareness, or like say if it is ringing bells for people, how do we stop overgiving when, especially when it's been a pattern that we've known for such a long time?
Yes, it is a bumpy road, I will say, but worth it. Because what it is you need the awareness before you can even start.
Yeah.
You also need that piece around it's not my fault. So I think that's where
Mm.
the cultural message helps, because it's like, it's not my fault, but it is now my problem.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of knowing where to join it up with the decisions you're making in everyday life. And
Mm.
this is what I've done a lot of thinking about in dating in particular, because you might know your overall pattern. You might still have a bit of an autopilot where
Yeah.
you've said yes before you realize that you've said yes. So there's like a phase of the work where you're aware of it,
Hmm.
but maybe catch it afterwards. That's
Yeah.
still helpful because you recognize, oh, that was an
Yeah.
opportunity to do it differently. There's a phase of the work where you're simultaneously, and this is the most uncomfortable bit, questioning yourself and having to validate yourself because it's not necessarily coming from people around you
Yes.
or with a good
Especially if you're
coach.
pushing back and not doing something. In fact, it might be,
Exactly.
yeah, causing issues or having people question, well, why are you saying no? You
Yeah.
normally say yes or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Mm.
So that's where it can be helpful to have the support of a good coach to
Yeah.
sort of just get your compass right on what you want to push back on.
Mm.
But also, you can end up shall we say, experimenting with communication by veering from like, I haven't said anything at all to perhaps gone a bit strong there. Sort of finding a middle ground in how you're actually sort of speaking up more for what you need or saying no to things that you don't want. And
Mm.
that's probably that's the most difficult and disrupted phase because
Mm.
actually you're not quite sure what you're doing, but you're doing it anyway. People
Yeah.
around you are also like, what? I was expecting that you would be fine, and now apparently it's
Mm.
fine. But once that dust settles, it's great because then actually you're much more authentically known for you and your
Yeah.
real preferences and what you really need. You're getting those needs met more often. And there's just a quiet sense of relief that actually you can be yourself. And it sort of challenges that overall background sense of like, it's okay to just be me
Mm.
without getting up and serving other people before I've even sat down and had my own dinner. Oh,
Yeah.
great, that is okay. It's good. So it's lots of micro experiences
Yeah.
building on each other to eventually kind of
Yeah.
tip the balance.
Yeah. And it's just as you're talking, I'm thinking it's not even
Mm.
about like ego. It's not even like I'm more important than you at all. It's more like I'm just as worthy as everybody else to,
Yes.
have my needs met, to be happy, to have rest, to have people look after me. There is no rule that says this is how you get love and value. Do you know what I mean? Because actually sometimes you might be taken advantage of. It, like I said, that there's no rule or law that says this is how things are done. It's just how it's been done up until this point.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
go on, sorry.
I'm just going to say, yes, it's not that we're saying you might not come back around to still being very nice and helpful to people. The difference is not at your own cost. And
Mm,
just you're one of the people in the room that you're making a decision about. So instead
yes.
of just thinking for us, you're also, your
Yeah,
needs are on
you're
the table
included in those decisions.
equally as
Yeah,
important to
absolutely.
everyone else. And you're as kind to yourself as you are to the other people that you're serving.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what changes when somebody does that and when they believe that they're worthy without having to earn it by looking after everyone else or saying yes to everything? What happens? What have you seen?
As I said, I think that's sort of what we were talking about just at the end there. what changes initially can feel difficult because it is disruptive. You're going against the norms that are in your life.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when you've got through the disruption and found a way of kind of tuning into yourself and communicating that works for you and those around you, it's just a bit of a quiet release. And you've got more energy, more sort of sense of permission to just
Yeah.
do what you want to do and be. And that is sort of a liberating kind of sense of freedom,
Yeah.
really.
Is there anything more specific that you see, like in the dating like world, in terms of how you know how differently people approach dating, or maybe those early stages of relationships, or
Mm.
what have you? When you feel less of that, like, I need to be agreeable, I need to show myself as like a good girl who's, another thing that I used to see in a pattern of one of my former clients who came to me, struggling with her self-worth and relationships, was, she'd, whenever, because she was, she just wanted to be loved and settle down and find her person. And so she would always be such an agreeable girlfriend. She'd be like, I'll do whatever I'll whatever plans they want to do, I will do, in those dating things. And I'll just so I can come across as easygoing and fun. But then she was finding that often people would just be a bit like, well, you don't necessarily have your own opinion. I feel like I'm carrying a lot of the relationship. But, I imagine if, certainly I saw, in the changes in her in terms of, how she dates differently. But I imagine there's probably, examples that you've seen as well of how people might act differently or date differently or be in those early stages differently when they're starting to break free of those patterns. So what does that often look like to you?
Yeah, I think one thing is being more relaxed. So it can feel like you're on trial if you're going from that performance energy, sort of thinking about, oh, I need to come across as agreeable and what do they want? So one early thing is people are like, oh, this is great. Actually, I can sit back and relax. And if anything, I'm judging them as much as they're judging me.
Mm.
Um, so it can be really helpful to balance it out by thinking about what I'm looking for and what they're demonstrating.
Yeah.
And then as they're moving through dating, it can feel uncomfortable, as we talked about, because actually what it might mean is experimenting with bringing things up earlier. Be
Mm.
that, actually, I don't fancy Italian. I'd quite like to go for a Thai.
Mm.
Or it could be having mini micro conversations. If something has unsettled you or
Yeah.
just not sat right with you, it kind of means bringing that up earlier
Yeah.
and taking the answer as data about that person rather than as something about your wife.
Yeah.
So those things don't feel easy to start with. I think once people get the hang of them, they really like it as an approach.
Yeah. Love that. Awesome. Well, we've come to our key takeaway part of the session, Kate. So, if our students took one thing away from today, one thing from this conversation, what would you want it to be? What would you want them to remember, if nothing else, about overgiving in relationships?
I think a key lever is to tune into your needs, and your feelings and your body will help you with that. So if you're feeling, for example, fatigue, what's that about? And what do you need? Is that you need lunch? You needed it 3 hours ago? Or is it that you need someone else to take the dog for a walk so you
Yeah.
can have a rest? If you're feeling angry, what boundary's been broken for you? What are you angry about? And what needs addressing?
Mm.
So it sounds simple, but it really isn't very easy,
Yeah.
especially if you've got a lifetime of veering away from it or thinking that's not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taking time and patience to recognize it is a good thing for you to do. It's ultimately going to make life more sustainable. So I think the main thing to say is tune into your needs. They are valid and they count.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. And well, I guess that is kind of a practical thing, a small practical action that our listeners can do. But is there anything else, any other simple practical action or exercise or anything that our students could do this week to start breaking these patterns and creating healthier relationships? Is there anything you would add to that?
I suppose if they would like to take those ideas about the pleaser, the helper, and the protector,
Hmm.
then they could also gently start just when when their awareness raises that they've done something they didn't want to do,
Yeah.
just ask that next question. What was that? Why did I do that? What was I fearing if I didn't do it?
Yeah.
And that helps with that sort of what
Yeah.
pattern am I trying to address here?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, everything starts with awareness. You can't change what you're not aware of. And I think having that power and knowledge is really, really important. So Kate, where can people find you if they want to come? I will share some stuff in the show notes for anybody that wants to connect with you or check out your stuff. But tell us a little bit about your program, how you work with people, any, resources that you'd like to share, and we can then share the links in the show notes for anybody that wants to have a look.
Thanks. Well, people can find me at www.drkatesherratt.com. That's where my practice and my Find Your Person program live. And the program is a 6-week program that's designed to help sort of self-aware, capable women who are ready for a relationship but getting stuck in these dating patterns to date differently with real strategies and practical grounded skills so that they can address unhelpful patterns, work out what it is they want to move towards, and create more opportunities to meet a variety of people, not just using dating apps. So all of that can be found on my website.
Awesome. Right, we'll share the links in the chat, but thank you so much, Kate, for being such a fab guest. I'm sure everyone will have enjoyed the lesson a lot, in fact, given us a lot to think about. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks. It's been lovely chatting.
So there you have it, ladies. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. What I really love about today's conversation is that Kate reminds us these patterns are not personality traits. They're not coded into our DNA. We're not stuck, experiencing these same things over and over again. They're actually protective strategies, and they were learned for a reason, but that doesn't mean that they have to define the rest of your life. So if today's episode resonated with you, I'd really encourage you to spend a little time reflecting on Kate's homework. And the next time you notice yourself saying yes when you wanted to say no, or putting somebody else's needs ahead of your own, just pause and ask yourself, why did I do that? Like, what was I afraid would happen if I didn't? Because awareness is always the first step to change. And if you'd like to connect with Kate or find out more about her work, including her Find Your Person program, her dating resources, her amazing dating quiz, you'll find all of her links in the show notes. And if you did enjoy today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you could either leave a rating or a review, or maybe just share it with someone who always seems to be carrying for everybody else. And I will see you next time for another lesson in becoming your happiest, most confident self. Have an awesome day.